Okay, the Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914 created the Federal Trade Commission. And this is a government agency whose job is to, again, promote competition. So they're designed to prevent unfair methods of competition and unfair or deceptive acts or practices affecting commerce. So again, if you're trying to wipe out your competitor through theft, vandalism, things like that, that'd be illegal under this act here. They can seek monetary redress and other relief for conduct injurious to consumers. And so, for example, this graph we looked at earlier, these are actually areas that we can calculate. We can actually calculate the area of that triangle and the area of this rectangle, and that is the damage done to consumers. And so under the Trade Commission Act, the Federal Trade Commission Act, they can actually sue on consumers' behalf to try to regain this lost surplus here, the deadweight loss part and the part transferred to the monopoly. These are dollar amounts. We know what they are. We can measure them. If we have good estimations of supply and demand, margin of cost and demand, then you can actually sue for monetary damages. And under antitrust laws, you can sue for triple damages. So if the area of these two losses here for consumers is, say, $10 million, well, they can sue for $30 million. And every once in a while, you might get something in the mail saying you're being sued on behalf, or there's some kind of agreement where you might get, anyone who bought this product between these two dates might get maybe 10 cents back for every product or every unit that you bought, something like that. They conduct investigations relating to the organization, business practices, and management of entities engaged in commerce, just to monitor what the behavior is going on. And they make reports on a regular basis to Congress. So the government has a lot of say on the mergers are announced, and they can come in and they can challenge the merger, like they did with Albertsons and Bonds, or they can allow the merger to take place. And so how do you decide where to draw the line? And what economists and government officials try to do is we like to come with methods of measuring monopoly power. It's a very common method is known as concentration ratios. The amount of a market is controlled by a certain number of firms. And we have two common ways of doing this. One is the 4-firm concentration ratio, and that's the amount of the market that's controlled by the 4 largest sellers. And 8-firm concentration ratio, amount of the market that's controlled by the 8 largest sellers. So, for example, down here, we have copper smelting. And so the 4-firm is 99%, 8-firm is probably 100. That is high concentration. If only 4 firms in the entire country control 99% of some market, that's extremely high concentration. House slippers. I never would have thought house slippers. So the 4 largest firms control 97%. 8 largest firms, 99%. These are very high rates. Guided missiles and space vehicles, okay, 96%. Cigarettes, 95% for 4-firm concentration ratios. Let's see, breweries, 91%. And that's from your big companies. You have a lot of craft breweries now. They're quite small compared to Miller, Budweiser, those companies. So where the government draws the line, it depends. It depends on the administration. It depends on what the courts are saying. And so you might say that in a market of breakfast cereals, that if there's going to be a merger between Kellogg's and Post, the government would say, no, not really. We're going to challenge that because that would greatly lower the concentration ratio. The ratios are very high. That's going to make it even higher. Another way to measure market concentration is to use a little bit more complicated method, Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, HHI. And this is calculated by taking the square of the market share of each firm in the market and then sum those calculations. So for example, if one firm controlled the entire market, you would take 100, which is the share of the market, you would square that, and that would be 10,000. That's the highest number you can have when one firm controls the entire market. If 2 firms control half the market, each share would be 50%. You square 50, that's 2,050. Add them together, you get 5,000. So 5,000 would be if 2 firms each have 1/2 of the market. And so 10 firms control the market. That would be 10%. 10 squared is 100. Add them up, that would be 1,000. This is a nice way to not just have the 4-firm concentration ratio, because again, with here, it's quite a bit difference if 4 firms control 99% of the market, but one firm controls 96%, and the other ones control a fraction. That's a lot different than if each 4 firms have an equal share of the market. If each of those 4 firms has 25% share of the market, or close to that, that would give us more competition than if one firm controlled 98%. And so this index here allows us to get more information on how that market actually is divided up. And they do have a guideline here, and that is at 1,000. If it's below, that indicates the market is a very unconcentrated, much more competitive, and a number above 1,800 they believe is a market that's highly concentrated. And so, for example, if you are the Justice Department, there's an anti-division in the Justice Department, they might challenge mergers that are in markets that have that number right now, above 1,800. And if you have a merger announced that after the merger takes place, it's not going to go above that number, the government might allow that to take place without any kind of challenge. The other option the government has is regulation, and they usually apply this to natural monopolies. Again, natural monopolies have a good aspect, and that is that they take advantage of large economies of scale. And so if you have large economies of scale, we don't want to break you up into, say, 10 small companies, because each of those 10 companies will be producing at a much higher average cost. Remember, the average cost is falling downward. And so we want to take advantage of one firm being out there. We like one firm to be there because they can produce at a much lower cost than if all 10 firms were over here. And so this is actually good to have much lower costs. It's more efficient. The problem is we can't leave them alone because they're going to charge monopoly prices. So the compromise is to regulate, to allow some kind of fair, efficient prices to take place. And there's 2 choices. One is known as marginal cost pricing. This would be the most efficient, because this is where marginal cost would cross the demand, and that would mimic competition. Marginal cost is supply for a regular market, and so where supply crosses demand, that's when you maximize consumer surplus. This is nice because this would produce every item where the marginal utility is above the marginal cost. So going out to QMC, which is the output, so QMC would be the output we get from marginal cost pricing. Marginal cost pricing is where marginal cost crosses demand, which is marginal utility. And so this output here is efficient because this is where everywhere where the marginal utility is greater than the marginal cost, and that's efficient. This would maximize our surplus. Here's our marginal utility. Marginal cost is below. We want to produce all those to be efficient. Over here, we don't want to go that far because that's where the marginal utility is now less than the marginal cost, and that would be inefficient. So from society's perspective, that would be the most efficient output. The problem is that because the average total cost is still falling here because of economies of scale, average total cost is going to be above that price. So this is your average total cost. This is your marginal cost pricing. And this is the price you would get if you left the monopoly alone. That's where marginal cost crosses marginal utility. Sorry, that's where marginal cost crosses marginal revenue. That would be the monopoly price. Here, if we force them to charge that price, they would lose money. And they might go out of business. And that's not good. So we don't want to run companies out of business. So a compromise is to do what economists call average total cost pricing. Average total cost pricing. That is, we're going to lose a little bit on efficiency because average total cost pricing is where average total cost hits the demand. And so we're going to charge this price here, which means we're going to lose out a bit on this output here. We're not going to maximize surplus. But we're going to do a much better job than if we allowed monopoly pricing. The monopolist would be there. This is the efficient output. But the problem there, the company can't cover its cost. So if you want to keep the company in business, the utility company in business, you want them to be able to charge a price where they can cover their expenses. And so you would have a utilities commission would come in and they would try to figure out where the average total cost crosses the demand and get that price there. And it's a compromise. You allow them to get normal profits, reasonable profits, and you get more output than you would under a monopoly. Again, this would be the efficient output, but that's not doable with economies of scale. And so with your water companies, your power companies, who tend to have economies of scale a lot, you tend to compromise and do average total cost pricing. Okay, and that's it for Chapter 9.